Oh my gosh, welcome. Almost fall equinox. I don't know about you, but I've been feeling some of the uptick of the energy. So, since I have you here with me today, I think I would love to share with you a little bit of my perspective and maybe have a discussion about it around what is spiritual maturity. This is something that's maybe more for definitely throughout the whole part of the path, but definitely I think more implemented and integrated in the intermediate and advanced path. And what I mean by that is the the beginning path and practitioners, the way I see it, the way I experienced it, was very much a lot about building personal power and stabilizing in the practice. And the personal power would allow us to build this healthy structures, the routine, the discipline to be able to have a constant, consistent practice. And that constant, consistent practice is what allowed us to start the journey, if you will, with eternity. The uh, the dance with light, if you will. And the way I experienced intermediate path, it was a lot of doing actually. And I laugh now, hindsight 2020 is even though it was extremely challenging in the doing, it was big things that we were really, at least for myself, really trying to manifest, incorporate into our lives that were the antithesis of what our ego wanted to do, right? In this very closed off, very small space. Like, no, I don't want to. I don't believe I can. And all these fears and self-doubts and insecurities. This is everything that was pushed up against and lit up in the intermediate path. Pretty much any and all insecurities and any kind of character defects in the ego was like on the spotlight in the intermediate path for myself. And so in that way, it was extremely challenging of things to have to work through. But on the other hand, the thing I loved about the intermediate path was it was a task master's blissful joy. I just have all these things to do, and I was like, okay, check, check, check. Even though if they were hard, right? Even if they took a long time to do, even though it wasn't a instant gratification piece, there was a purpose. There was a direction, very clear, and it felt like a very linear path, even though this is not a linear path at all. The linearity, I think, helped keep my human sanity, if you will, and find my way as I just kind of follow the next little breadcrumb along the path. And so, even though it was challenging, I look back and I would say I actually enjoyed the intermediate path. And I had a comfortable familiarity around it, if that made sense. It was in the familiar, comfortable part with my past life profile of like a warrior in battle and missions and this purpose. It was very clear and defined for me that I felt comfortable enough to move through all that despite the challenges, right? And knowing that the purpose and the meaning behind what I was doing created a lot of peace. Now, step over to the advanced path, everything, all the to do, all the directions, all the directives were kind of released and dissolved. And very similar probably to a doctorate degree program. I haven't done a degree program myself, but I have friends, who have. And there's a point in the doctorate degree where you start doing your own research and whatever your dissertation, right? And that is very a self-directed piece of education and teaching yourself, self-learning. And you create this dissertation, right? And then you present it, and then they see, if there are any holes in it, and then the professors say, fix that, fix this, and then there's this refinement process on the dissertation, is my understanding. until it's accepted, and then, dissertation or thesis, whatever you will, completes the whole process, and then, okay, graduation, and then the degree. So similar to that in regards to the advanced path, there was no more directives. There's no mom coming in, or parent coming in at some time at night. Did you do your homework, Jane? Did you make sure you eat your meal? Did you, get your exercise in to check off all the things you needed to stay healthy while continuing to fulfill this specific task? There weren't so clearly defined check boxes to check off, if you will. So in the advanced path, there has to be this clear, honed in spiritual maturity that has been cultivated since the beginning. And I don't think a lot of people speak about this because we're always doing so much. I mean, in the beginning path, you're trying to stabilize your practice, your life, and all the things that feel like they're so crazy and chaotic. And then in the intermediate path, you do not have any like time, it feels, right? Because you have so much to do, is what I felt like in my intermediate path. It was like not just having a 40-hour work week job, you had to do overtime, and then you had a second job on the weekends. That's what the practice felt like. And that level of intensity doesn't naturally go, oh, I am focusy and I'm working on my spiritual maturity today. There's not such a overt, obvious thing. I think it's more subtle. So bring it to the forefront today, talking about what my experience has been around spiritual maturity and why it is so important in not only our path of practice, but specifically in the advanced path. And one of the things looking back that builds spiritual maturity is, guess what? Failure, and things not working out the way we want it to, things not working out the way we think it should. Any of those things, pretty much, that fall into some form of expectation, is kind of an umbrella way to kind of have a container for it. Any kind of expectation that was not met along any point of my life, the aftermath of the expectations not getting met was the opening, if you will, of the moment, the teaching tool, the lesson of where I was able to refine some spiritual, emotional, psychological maturity around the thing. And usually the emotional and psychological maturity happens as we naturally go through life and become adults, right? We have responsibilities, we have bills to pay, we have things, pets, kids, loved ones to take care of. So that responsibility, similar to beginning, path to now intermediate path, the responsibilities increase. And so naturally we have a certain sense of emotional maturity to address it. There's no, okay, I'm not going to feed the pets today because I don't want to, right? We have a clear understanding in our maturity, emotionally, psychologically, that, oh, this responsibility is one, a choice I took on, right? And therefore, and also there is this interconnectedness within our relationship that I have chosen to partake in. And therefore, this is my part of the responsibility I do to take care of this relational dynamic, right? So that there is harmony, so that there's balance, so that there's, this peace and joy, and this greater expansion of enjoyment, right, around a beautiful relationship. I mean, I don't have a fur baby myself, but how often do I see my friends who have fur babies? The enjoyment, the love, the incredible symbiotic, relationship that comes forth from that. The human takes care of the dog, right, and all of its needs, and the dog brings tremendous joy and also sometimes legit huge de-stressor, right, for the certain occasion. So in this leveling up of responsibilities, we have maturity that kind of naturally slots itself in, right, behind the responsibilities. So what does spiritual maturity look like? Well, the way I look at it, the way I define it, spiritual maturity is all of that emotional, psychological maturity, and then it also entails a very, very refined level of personal responsibility and accountability. And this refined level of personal responsibility and accountability deeply incorporates, our own self-care that goes into the self-discipline, that incorporates the practice, that also recognizes this interconnectedness with us and other beings in life in general. And therefore, we're mindfully utilizing our tools and techniques, right, to further compassion, loving kindness, bodhicitta, and recognizing that when we get a little bit off balance, how that ripple effect, right, in a karmic way, can create suffering, right? If I'm feeling extra hormonal or something like that, and I say a lash out phrase, to my husband when I'm in the kitchen because I'm getting hangry, right? There is a suffering that karmically I have incurred, and he might not say anything in that moment, or he might, and then the ripple effects happen, right? That play out in this cause and effect thing for, it could be that next hour, it could be the rest of that day, it could be the rest of the week. Who's to say, right? The eternity kind of takes care of all that. And the play out could be like, that didn't feel nice. Why are you being so grumpy, right? And let us snap back. And it could be kind of this tense moment until we, having spiritual maturity, can take accountability and responsibility in that moment through mindfulness practice. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I'm being super hangry right now, right? I just need to make some food. Can you give me some space in the kitchen so I can just move? Oh, okay. Is that what you need? Sure, happy to do that, right? And moves out of the way, right? And uses another counter space, right? And then karmically, right? Maybe the response from the husband's like, wait, how does that make sense? I was technically in the kitchen first, and then you came in and you were hungry, and all of a sudden you took the prime spot on the countertop. It's like, oh, another moment of spiritual maturity, right? Of inwardly looking at ourselves, our behaviors, our actions, our thoughts, our speech, our mind, right? Where is it? Do I have to correct it and adjust myself so that the external world, as it ripples out, comes back to balance, comes back to harmony, right? This is, I feel like, the highest use of power when we use it in our practice. It's not to say that this turns into this like very saccharine, people pleasing, caretaking behavior where we are not taking care of ourselves and we're constantly outwardly focused on others and trying to fix everything, fix everyone, and the situation is in a total chaotic crap storm, right? That that actually is spiritual immaturity, I would say, or it's lacking spiritual maturity in those moments because we have not come back to recognize, wait, what is it that I need first? Okay, there's a lot of chaos. I'm feeling really anxious from this. Do I need to remove myself? Do I actually need to eat something? Do I need to actually engage more to this specific person because I feel a little anxious that they took what I said the wrong way? There's all these skillful ways. I'm not saying there's one way, right? I want to clearly say that there's many skillful ways and it depends on the moment and situation of what is necessary and what is needed. And so personal accountability and responsibility absolutely begins with us and begins with us in a way of checking our states of mind. What is our speech? What is the tone like? What are we saying? And then also looking behind the scenes of what's our intention in this situation? What's our intention around this relationship? You know, if the relationship is, on a martial arts mat, it's intended to be growth inducing, then maybe there will be kind of this friction that we will feel with our egos. Like, oh, okay, this is actually to take personal responsibility and accountability is to stay humble, open-minded, open-hearted, and learning. Like, how can I remain teachable in this moment? Like, okay, yes, I hear a correction. And the spiritual maturity would not to be a hour-long debate of why you did your technique this other way. And
Yeah, right here.
like, yeah, and instead go, yes, sensei, what is it you like to say? And maybe sensei will have said their thing, the same thing, the 10,000 times. Like, don't you remember? Don't use the muscle, use your body, move the whole body, and
And
shift
it's
and pivot around this thing. Yeah, go
thanks.
ahead.
Yes, yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
That usually does it. Yes, thank you very much.
Right? Also, when I'm learning and training with a senior student, right, that isn't sensei, it's like, oh, I would do this, and usually there is a consistent dynamic where the senior students always have something to correct. Like, can't they just get something right? Right. So that's something that we have to work through of in this spiritual maturity, how to stay humble. Humble is not to be walked over. Humble is op- humility to me is being teachable, being open-minded, open-hearted to be like, oh, what is it that I can learn here and now? No matter the situation, no matter the person, no matter even if you are in the position of sensei, what can I learn from this situation? How are my students doing? How is everyone training on the mat that maybe I can do something to affect, right, the highest, brightest in all, right, in that situation. That's kind of a very high, bright intention I like to use, right? For the highest and brightest is the ask I place there. So what gets lost, I feel like, going back to the spiritual practice in the intermediate path, the advanced path, is what I've seen. We've worked so hard on the intermediate path. It's like training for the Olympics, right? So advanced path for the Olympics, we're in the NFL. Let's say it's NFL, right? Even though I'm not a big football person, but I hear enough on the periphery that I'm aware. So let's say advanced path is the NFL. So you're making multi-millions of dollars as a player. You're a professional athlete. You're professionally doing this practice, right? This is your time, life, and your mind. It's not like, oh, I just go on the weekends to play football. No, you are doing this. You get into the gym, you're training, you have trainers come help work with your body, right? There's a whole process around this piece. So in the advanced path, what sometimes happens is this spiritual ego and or what you might call a spiritual elitism that happens. And I want us to be aware of that so it doesn't become a trap for us. And what I mean, spiritual elitism, a classic one is kind of hierarchically judging, right, and profiling people, taking their inventory, as you will, as another phrase that my clients like to use, around where one is on their spiritual path. It's like, oh, how many years have you meditated? Oh, how long do you meditate? Do you meditate twice a day? And who's your teacher? Are they enlightened? And how many teachers have you studied with? And oh, have you lived in an ashram, in a monastery, and da da da? Right? Like, this, I call it the spiritual elitism, spiritual ego mixed in together, right? Like, my goodness, I was just wanting to bring my highest, brightest self and be amongst other spiritual people. I didn't realize I had to bring my spiritual resume alongside it, right? Can you imagine if we had spiritual resumes? That'd be so crazy, including past lives and all this stuff like that. It'd be hilarious. It'd be really hilarious. But because we have curated such a deep devotion and love and commitment to this practice at the intermediate and advanced path, we sometimes, oh, how do I say, we sometimes can get caught up. I guess that's the best way. We can sometimes get caught up, like watching a wonderful dramatic show, or TV drama or Netflix drama, whatever it is, right? you can get caught up in this comparison, contrast, and it almost feels very competitive, right? Very competitive. And something my teacher shared with me that I, I forget if maybe she referenced it from Rama himself, Dr. Frederick Lentz, our root guru, where he said, spiritual practice is one's spiritual practice is none of your business, like no one else's business to anyone else. And also, none of our business to ourselves. So think about that for a minute, right? Because I remember I was having this conversation with some spiritual friends, and they were going kind of down the little spiritual resume. Like, did you do this? Did you get this? Did you hit this samadhi? Did you get to this level of this kind of conversation? And oh, you did? When did you do that? And why didn't you tell me? I would have loved to know, kind of thing. And Sharia chimed in at that time. I was like, well, her practice is none of your business. And they're like, oh, yeah, I think maybe, right? And then she added the other thing is, and also your own spiritual practice is none of your business. And as I reflected on that a little bit more of maybe what Rama meant was, okay, that checks out because one, we do this practice for ourselves, do we not? And then naturally in this beautiful way that this practice exponentially expands light as it blesses and it beautifies all the people, places, things around us. But that doesn't mean our spiritual ego and says, aha, I did it. I did it all and I'm so awesome, right? It's like, yes, and light, eternity. Hello, where was eternity in all this? Yes, right? And then how come spiritual practice is none of our business? Because people would be like, wait, that doesn't make any sense. And as I think about it, that makes perfect sense now to me because the ego, the you, the sense of self, right, that identification that we have in this world to operate in this world, it is none of its business to know where we are in our spiritual journey, our spiritual ascension, however you want to call it, because it's not the self that's ascending. It's really the self that's dissolving so that the spirit, conscious, whatever you want to call, does the ascension. You know, we don't do it. I doesn't do it. Me doesn't do it, right? There's no who, essentially, in the doing, in the realm of the advanced path. And that can be really confusing for people. Like, wait, if I'm not doing it, then who's doing it? But I haven't, right? And then it goes all into this crazy spiritual philosophical debate that I will let you go do that. In there's what's the practice? Is it yana yoga that has this very introspective, like reflective, like contemplation, right? That's what Trikaya Buddhism calls it, that contemplation and reflection process that you go through, right? Absolutely necessary. So yes, do that. And coming back to what I was talking about in this spiritual ego, spiritual elitism that gets maybe a trap that we can step into in intermediate and advanced path is, can you imagine going to an NFL player making millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, right? Peak of their performance game and like, okay, I would like to tell you this. And they're like, no, I have nothing to learn, from you, XYZ. And I feel like, my goodness, if an top NFL sports athlete said that to some teacher that came in and want to share with them meditation, something else, mindfulness, some breathing technique or something like that, if they were closed off to receiving that, from my perspective around that feels to me like they've actually shut themselves down and they're actually now limiting themselves to the exponential potentials that are still possible in their NFL professional career. Does that make sense? Right. And I think that's something I admire tremendously in professional athletes who are continual seekers in learning and growing about how to refine their sport, their art, their practice in a more elevated way that up levels them as an athlete even more, right? And a great one with Simone Biles with gymnastics over the recent Olympics. The way, people talk so much about her age and her comeback, and here she was, talking about mental health. And I love that because I feel like she opened this door of recognition for one, but for all athletes, like, hey, there is something that you can actually learn more about yourself through called therapy, mental health. And in that learning more about yourself, you can actually strengthen yourself in a way that you actually become a better athlete as a result. That's kind of what I feel like her message is when I feel like she shares about it so openly, as such a beautiful advocate for mental health. So going all the way back to spiritual maturity, right? Part of spiritual maturity is continuing to be open-minded, open-hearted to learning, continuing to cultivate humility and purity around, hey, maybe I've reached the top peak of my game in advanced practice, or as an NFL player. And what more can I learn? How can I continue to better myself? What can I do better? And how, by me doing better, how does that then affect my whole team? You know, okay, maybe we've won all these Super Bowls. What else can we do together? What cool thing, right? And this spiritual maturity that I feel like is so important at the intermediate advanced path, because if we are not cultivating that spiritual maturity with personal responsibility and accountability deeply, honestly, ruthlessly honest, right? We we can I feel like the trap is we can place ourselves on a pedestal. And when we place ourselves on that pedestal and we have amazing fawning audiences and students potentially and a raving, sports fans, that can create a spiritual ego that makes us, you know, um, it's not thinking outside of the box and being able to achieve otherworldly things. It makes us feel in a very egotistical way that we could accomplish and do things, right? That we don't necessarily look so far down the road of what possible ripple effects or suffering or cause and effect or karma, whatever the word you want to use, it can cause in other people far down the line. It doesn't have to be currently in this current moment. And I think that's one of the immense responsibilities that starts to happen at the advanced path. The intermediate crossing over to the advanced is you're no longer just responsible with yourself and like your inner circle of like loved ones, pets and animals and all that stuff like that. At the advanced level of spiritual practice, there is this world system of responsibility that starts to that we start to tap into and be part of. It's not I feel like we tap into it in the sense that we start tapping into understanding how to work with it, but we are absolutely part of that inevitably, and just outrightly so along our spiritual practice, because we have curated so much light, power, and in our practice at the level of advanced path. It's really asking, like if you were to ask one of the amazing, teachers and Buddhists, it's like, what is it you want to do with your life? And the things I have read and studied is, oh, I want to share more light. And I want to help people, find their light. And it becomes this very beautiful dissemination of light, which I feel like is really, really at the heart and the root of practice, meditation practice. But in the beginning, when we start, it's like, okay, I just need to do me, and then I can take care of the world, and that takes time. And in that time, as that spiritual maturity develops with the humility and the purity, it becomes this really beautiful process that ripples out in some amazing ways. And unfortunately, what I have seen when the spiritual maturity isn't there, it can create suffering in the sense of, you know, like I call it the fuck it's, right? Like, oh, I've reached the top. I've, I'm the NFL player. I'm the best. I get paid everything. Everyone's taken care of with money and all stuff like that, houses. And so, fuck it. I can do whatever I want. Drink on the weekend and okay, mess around, infidel, and then you see all the news of all the crazy stuff, right? That happens in that world. But that's on the news level, the kind of extreme things that also legitimately happens in and along spiritual practice, right? When us as spiritual practitioners, when we reach the intermediate advanced states, if if we play with that, fuck it, I don't need to work today. I don't need to work at all. Fuck that, fuck this, you know what I mean? Fuck responsibilities. The initial maybe high, the sense of rebelliousness is like is it reminds me of like when I ditched high school the one day. The one day I ditched high school because I was like one of those students that was scared of like ditching and doing anything bad. The one day I ended up hanging out with my friends, and one of the friends had a car and they drove, and they ended up rear-ended a telephone pole, and it was this big crap show of like, oh my god, what am I gonna do with the car,
Oops.
and big oops, big dent in the trunk. And I don't think I was working then. It was a high school. I didn't have a job. I was like, shit, how do I have money to help my friend? I was like, I was stressed. I was stressed myself. And I was like, now am I going to get in trouble because I did school the one day? Of course, what a lesson, right? So, so I'm saying that I take the buckets kind of like that. Like initially, it feels really high and bright, like, yeah, what is cool? And now I can go do whatever I want. And honestly, I still remember that one day that I did school. It was nothing special. It's like we grabbed some like junk food takeout, drive through thing. And when we went back to my friend's house, we ate it. And then it was like, well, we better get back to school because we did. I was like, what? Oh, that was it? That's how you did school? It didn't feel like that big of a deal. But that initial high was like, yeah. But then this interesting ripple effect of the karma of the buckets is there are consequences to our choices. And the consequences that day was a rear-ended car with a bad dent bumper. And honestly, I don't recall what ended up happening or how they got fixed because I absolutely had no money to chip in and I felt really bad. And and maybe because of that, I didn't really talk to that person anymore and our friendships maybe fizzled out after that, which is probably a real thing. So at the level of intermediate advanced path, when we get these moments of fuck it, I ask that you instead take that and look at it and be like, okay, I'm saying fuck it. Is it because one, I'm not interested in that anymore? Two, is it because I need to take care of myself on something and that feels like it's gonna take more than I have a capacity to do? Um, Also the fuck it is, oh, is it no longer dharmically aligned? Does it feel not aligned to me and I feel like I've outgrown it or it's no longer a fit for me to do, right? So when we look a little bit deeper below the surface of, oh, just fuck that, fuck that, da, da, there are usually, at least that's what I found, usually teaching for us to, in the advanced path, to refine even more. And that's super cool because, as my teacher says, it just keeps going. And you're like, whoa.
Mhm.
Although, when I moved from intermediate path to advanced path, I was very much upset and bitter about that the path kept going because I really wanted to be done. I wanted to finish my courses and I wanted to be done. I wanted to be in retirement, done with nothing to do. But if I'm honest and let's look at life as an example, people who are thriving and happy and mobile in their retirement are usually filled with purposeful things that they continue to do in their life, right? That they continue to have the right structure, the right schedule, the self-discipline to further their their ascension process, right? Their refinement process, the up leveling process.